And after a quick break, we're back here with the 2024 March Madness picks for this year's NCAA tournament. Before we get to the picks, though, I do want to talk about just a couple of quick things about the channel, about some possible off-season stuff before we get to the Academy Awards next year. So first of all, I've been kind of teasing here for almost a year a series that I'm planning on making, and I'll tell you, the series is still on. I've got the first video is over halfway complete. I do want to wait until I have at least 3 of these. It's going to be a 5-video series. I want to wait until I have the first 3 done before I post the first one. That way we don't have, you know, a long lull in between each upload. Otherwise, you know, I might have one, you know, the first one I might get done, say, in the next couple weeks. Maybe, well, probably closer to about a month from now after March Madness gets over. But after that's over, then we can move on to, back to that. And I might get it done, say, like at the end of April or the beginning of May or something. Okay, then I'll get it done. But that next video, I have to start over again, and it's going to take, you know, another, how long to do it. But it is one of those things where it took me a while logistically kind of to figure out how to do this first one, so that's part of the reason why this first one is coming so slowly. Free time has also been an issue here through the last year, but hopefully that's, fingers crossed, going to be something I'm going to have more time to devote to, and yeah, so I'm still working on those videos. I'm keeping a little hush about what the topic is, but it's something that if you enjoy the Oscar predictions, it's right up your alley. I'm just going to say that. It's very, very not straying too far from what has built this channel up. And while we're on this topic here of sports predictions, which is going to be the NCAA tournament prediction stuff here, the bracket predictions, I do want to open up the possibility because there are some major sports that I follow, like this last year, college football, NFL, college basketball. I will follow some NCAA softball as well. Those are kind of my core 4 sports, if you will. The ones that it's like, boom, I'll just go ahead and dig in. Like NBA, I just can't get into. I've watched the Michael Jordan documentary series, the The Last Dance. I've seen that a couple of times, and man, if I was born just a little earlier, I would have, I really would have dug that, but it was really before my time. I would have been probably 2-3 years old when the last season was going on, where he was with the Bulls. So I was a little young for that to fully comprehend and get it. But anyways, otherwise, yeah, I don't really like. Sometimes a little bit of college baseball once in a while I'll get into. MLB, forget it. I can't even name 3 MLB players right now, aside from maybe Shohei Ohtani. I couldn't name 2 other ones, I'll bet. Just not my sport. College women's basketball I'm also keeping up with a little bit better this year. I filled out a bracket for the first time this year on women's. I know it might be, some people are like, really? This is the first time you've done it? True, yeah, I know. But I don't know. I'm not quite confident enough to put those predictions out. So anyways, but like NFL stuff, I've really been digging that the last year here. So, you know, I've been thinking about kind of maybe throwing something together. It would be, the thing is, it runs right with the Oscar season. So it would have to be like, okay, there might be some days where it's like, okay, I'll shoot an Oscar video and then maybe I have to turn around and do something else. Same would have to go with college football, of course. That also runs concurrent with it. And then basketball starts, and Jesus, I don't know how to cover that, because it's like, okay, we'll have basically a Power 4 next year in college sports with ACC, SEC, Big Ten, and the Big 12, and then you have everyone else kind of scattered for everything else. So that'll be interesting to see, obviously, the first year how that works for, you know, obviously a lot of this is triggered by football, just because of the financials of all the conferences and stuff, but it'll be interesting to see, you know, how it works. And, you know, I've been kind of banning about, like, okay, how would I do that as a college show, which would be like maybe like a weekly recap or something. But I guess that'd be about the best way to do it. You could do it like football. You could do weekly, you know, before the game or after the game or something, you know, or maybe one of each, just to kind of talk about that. Yeah, and it's something I'm considering. I don't know if this is necessarily, you know, going to be music to the ears of my subscribers here. Maybe you guys aren't interested at all. Potentially, it could open up the possibility of bringing new people in who could then, you know, get caught up with some of the Oscar stuff that I've been doing for the last, what's it been, 12 years now? Jesus, how time flies, right? You know, so I've considered it. I've considered doing like a separate channel that would be, you know, more like the Plagman Rules Sports channel or something. I've considered a couple of things, but I really do want to open it up to you guys to feel free to join in there and let me know, like, in the comment section, what you guys are thinking. Like, is this stuff that you care about? Stuff that you're like, I don't give a shit, just talk about Oscar shit, that's all I'm here for? Are you guys more like, hey, I just like predictions and, you know, guessing and stuff, so trying to predict stuff, is that, you know, that's what you're here for, or is it other stuff? I'm just a little unsure exactly what you guys are liking the best or what you're not liking as much, so I definitely would appreciate comments and you know, stuff, so we can kind of go from there. And I'm interested in doing this stuff. It's just, as long as the interest, there's enough interest there where it's not just going to be, okay, I upload like twice a week, spend like probably 2 to 3 hours doing the stats on, especially like a basketball thing, covering all that. When you have like, especially when we get like tough into the really far into the conference season, where it's like, okay, maybe one team in like the ACC, for example, has like 3 games that I have to, you know, recap that week with stats and shit. And it's like, okay, if I'm doing all that, spending hours upon hours doing that, is it going to be worth it? Or are we going to have enough people tune in? Or is it going to be like, okay, I spend hours on this, upload it, and it gets like 12 views. And it's like, oh, that's not great. So it's, yeah. So before I, you know, dive in and make promises on that, I do want to ask for some opinions and comments there. So with that all out of the way, we're going to go ahead and get into the March Madness bracket. I'm historically terrible at this. But then again, I don't know, like last couple years, just in my family pool, that's been about 18 to 19 people. I think it might get up to 20 this year. I don't know, I've usually been in like the top 10 at least, you know, so hitting that top 50%. But I don't know. There's some people that follow this, particularly college basketball, a little bit more than me in the family, so they usually do a little bit better. Then sometimes you have some outsiders that just pick some of their favorite teams, and what do you know, their team goes very far that year. So it's always fun to predict this shit and be dead wrong. And that opening weekend is always just a ton of fun. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. We'll cover the East bracket first. We'll go East, and then we'll go to the South, then we're going to go to the West, and then to the Midwest. We'll just do the first round through each bracket, then we'll do the second round, and so on and so forth. We'll go that way. So the first round is always the toughest one, or sorry, I shouldn't say toughest, it's the longest one to get through, because we've got 32 games to recap here. And yeah, basically we're going to start here, and we'll go like the 1-16 to the 8-9, like down the bracket that way, ending with the 2 and 15 matchup in each separate bracket. So that's how we're going to do it. Okay, first of all, just some general comments about the East bracket this year. Actually, no. Let me just do a couple quick comments just about the season, because I don't usually get to talk about this very much. I was a little bit disappointed, I think, by the committee's choice to only put 3 teams in from the Big East, just because I'm seeing UConn. They're the top of the East bracket. They've been pretty fun to watch. You got a lot of teams like potentially St. John's, Seton Hall especially, I would have loved to see in there, because Seton Hall has pulled some, maybe not massive, but they pulled some great upsets this year and close games, so they would have been fun to see in the tournament. Providence kind of got some stuff going late, and that Jalen Carter guy is really fun to watch. So I'm hoping he sticks around, or if he transfers, or if he goes to the NBA, whatever, you know, good on to him. But he made Providence fun to watch. I was also, otherwise though, I'm trying to think who else. ACC I felt like was down this year. Some of the bigger giants in that league really were down a bit. Chief among them, Duke. I feel like Duke is a little risky to take very far in this tournament. SEC was kind of a little sloppy at times. You'd have Kentucky or sometimes even Tennessee. I mean, well, I think Tennessee really just that SEC tournament performance is the only thing that has people a little worried about them. But, Kentucky felt a little up and down this year, allowing a lot of points, but then scoring a lot of points. Florida was a little up and down. Auburn felt pretty good. Once in a while they drop a game, but that happens in conference play. I'm trying to think who else here. For ACC, otherwise it's like, Clemson was okay this year. They had good moments, but overall not the best season from them. Pac-12 was a disappointment for their final year as the Pac-12. So not a lot of great teams out of there. Arizona, we'll talk about, of course, when we get to them. Otherwise, you got the Big Ten was all right this year, pretty good. Purdue felt like they maybe needed that Big Ten tournament win to kind of solidify themselves as the number one overall seed, and the fact they didn't get it, I think, helped UConn get that number one overall seed. Illinois has pissed me off a lot this year because it feels like they get onto a good groove and then they'll start dropping games, or they won't be able to close games out. I can particularly remember they were playing, I believe it was at home against Nebraska this year. Nebraska's actually got a solid team this year. Good for them. Usually I'm cheering against the Huskers, but since Iowa's not in this year, I can't really talk too much. So, that particular game, I remember Nebraska closing in, and they actually forced overtime, even though Illinois was up, I believe, double digits going into the last 2 minutes or something, and they just let it slip in the final moments there. But I don't know. I feel like since then they've maybe done it 1 or 2 more times, but they've been otherwise pretty decent. Wisconsin started really hot, and then they really slid off at the end there, but then their performance in the Big Ten tournament definitely said, wait, nope, we're back on track. So good on to them. Otherwise, Northwestern's been fun to watch this year with Bubui having another great season. He's been fun to watch. I think that's... Michigan State has been all over the fucking place, and I hate that they got in, but... okay. I feel like they're always very, very hard to predict when they get to the tournament. Last year I actually did pretty well with them going to the Sweet 16, I believe, and then I got that one correct. But I felt good about them last year. I do not feel good about them at all this year. Otherwise, you got the Big 12, of course, has been the showstopper this year. Every Big 12 game, it has felt like here in the last couple months, has been substantial. It's been crucial. It's really helped solidify that field. You've got Iowa State coming on very, very strong after their big performance in the Big 12 tournament. Houston's always a dangerous team, it feels like, this year especially, since they're out of the non-Power 5s. They're into a Power 5 now, or what will be a Power 4 next year. So they've really solidified that, yep, we're a dangerous team. We're not just good because we were in smaller conferences. So they're dangerous. Texas Tech is okay. I see, I'm just kind of flipping through the different brackets and finding all the teams here. Texas A&M is SEC school. They've been interesting. Their performance in the SEC tourney was interesting. BYU is kind of a live by the 3, die by the 3 team, but when they're hitting, man, they're really hard to stop. They're one to look out for. Baylor, I feel like, is something, they're a 3 seed in that West bracket, but I'm telling you, I haven't heard a lot of chatter about them, and I'm wondering if that's going to come back and bite everybody on the ass, because they've pulled some good wins this year. Some of them, like in particular, the craziest game this year is the it was Iowa State at Baylor, and that was the one where Scott I forget, is it Drew Scott or Scott Drew, whichever. I've just brain fart right now, but the coach, he got ejected with like 10 minutes to go in the second half. The bench got a technical. Iowa State started coming back because Baylor had built up, like, I think a double-digit lead at that point. And then it's like chaos in the last couple minutes, and all of a sudden you have like the timer goes off, and Iowa State looks like they have the game-winning shot, and then they look back and they review it, and they're like, nope, he didn't get it off in time. And there were so many reviews and the refs in that game, and I remember watching it, and there was one point where the ref at the very end, after they said, okay, the shot's no good, Baylor wins, they went back one more time, I believe, and said, we need to make sure the clock started on time. And I just howled like I was in a straitjacket. I was laughing so hard because I'm like, this game is never going to end. Oh, so fun times, fun times. But Baylor's been one. They felt like they have been a lot of up and downs, some very disappointing performances. Kansas also very disappointing performances here, especially in the last month. It felt like they've really started to slip, and with some key injuries, still an unknown at this time. It's not a bad bet to say that they are going to struggle in this tournament, or they could really surprise us and really come back. And with Bill Self and the experience he's had, he won this whole thing. What was it, 2-3 years ago now? So he's an experienced coach. Sometimes you got to go with that experience. But anyways, Texas is in as well. They're one to look out for. I'm trying to think who else. Who else has been fun to watch this year? Of the smaller teams, the ones that win their conference and get in, McNeese State is one that I really, really, really need to stress. Like, we need to watch out for this team. That is a Cinderella waiting to happen. They've been really fun to watch. Even though they're not in a strong conference, they score a lot of points, and they usually do pretty well, so I would really look out for them to make a big upset appearance. Let's see, who else? Long Beach State has a very interesting story with what happened with their head coach and him basically being out, and then they make the tournament. So they're going to be interesting to watch. They do have a really tough draw in that first game, though, with Arizona. Colgate has been disappointing when I've watched them this year. Same with Dayton. I wouldn't really go too far on either one of those two teams. Grand Canyon has a lot of supporters behind them. They've got a pretty tough draw in that first one with St. Mary's. So that one's going to be interesting to watch. You've got Howard's gotten some good wins this year. They're one to look out for. Drake winning the Missouri Valley and putting out Indiana State, who could have been an at-large bid, but they did not make it in. Drake is in a local team for me where I'm located at. So, yeah, so they're one that I know a lot of people here really are hoping that they will win at least that first matchup with number 7 seed Washington State. Who else? Yale. You got to look out for those Ivy League stunners in the first round. And Yale, they drew Auburn, but man, Yale feels a lot like the Princeton team last year, just waiting to explode. So that one really could be a tough 13-4 matchup. I would look out for an upset there. UAB is coming in hot, winning the what was it? That's the American, right? Or is it Conference USA? I always get those two confused. They're in the same one as FAU, I know that, but they're coming off an upset win there as the 12 seed against number 5 San Diego State, who went very, very far, and nobody saw them going that far, really, last year in the tournament, so they're one to look out for. Anyone else? JMU, James Madison University, and out of the Sun Belt, has been spectacular this year, just dominating their conference, but again, they've got a very tough draw in a hot Wisconsin team, so that's going to be tough. Duke has been up and down. They do get Vermont first round. Again, we'll go into each of these games a little bit over time here. I'm just kind of trying to do a brief, as brief as I can, overview of like some of the teams I've watched and stuff. But yeah, Vermont I've watched a few times. They're a good ball club, and they could open up a couple leads on Duke. It's just going to depend on a couple things there. Foul trouble, especially for Duke, is going to be a big thing. Who else? You got NC State coming in hot out of the ACC, winning that tournament. And we want to make a couple quick comments here. We've seen a couple teams win their conference tournament unexpectedly and then lay an egg as soon as they get to March Madness. It happened with Georgetown a couple, 2-3 years ago out of the Big East tournament, and it happened 2 years ago in the ACC when it was Virginia Tech who kind of came out unexpectedly and won that conference title. Boom. Or conference tournament, I should say. Conference tournament. Boom. Then they laid an egg first round as well. Let's see. I'm trying to... down to the last one here, I think. Yeah. Okay, so I kind of cleared through all the smaller schools there. And I'm going to go ahead because it's starting to get dark out. We're going to probably need this by the end of the video here. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started here with the... and then just a quick thing, I want to talk about the brackets, like how easy or how hard the bracket is. The East bracket, my God, they stacked this bracket. You've got UConn, FAU, Northwestern, UAB, Auburn, Yale, BYU, Illinois, Drake, Iowa State, all have potential to make a Sweet 16 or further run. Potential, not saying obviously they can't all because they're in the same bracket. But if they had taken any, like, one or two of these teams out of this bracket, you could legitimately make a point that in another bracket they could totally, maybe not win the whole thing and go to the Final Four, but they could certainly make a deep impact for sure. So this is the most stacked one. And it's the one where it's like, okay, do you just go with the 1 seed all the way through? Because UConn is the #1 overall seed. They look really, really, really solid. They have a great chance to repeat this year and go back-to-back in victories in this tournament. Yeah, but you've got, again, so many great teams there and so many spectacular players that it's going to be hard to narrow that one down. The South bracket is, that's one that I feel like we could have some sneaky picks there with, like, Kentucky, potentially Florida if they get on a hot streak. They just did pretty well in the SEC tournament. Marquette, if they've got Kohler, or maybe I'm mispronouncing his name, but they're good player there. If he's in, which, you know, he's been pretty iffy here in the last month or so, whenever that injury started. Boy, yeah, that's going to be it's a different team when he doesn't play. We can be very honest about it. It's still a decent team, but it's not near that, you know, top 5, top 10 team when he's not on the floor. You've got otherwise, you know, Houston. They are missing a couple bench players as well, but we'll see. They've still got a pretty strong core there and stuff, so I expect them to still do pretty well here. But yeah, Wisconsin is definitely on a hot streak here. Kentucky has the ability to do some damage, so this is still a pretty hard bracket as well. The West and the Midwest, I feel, are a little more... This is where we have the potential for upsets. These are the 2 1 seeds that I'm a little shakier on. North Carolina is really solid, and you know, they won the ACC, you know, regular season pretty convincingly. But, you know, there's still a couple question marks with them. And in this bracket, you know, Mississippi State has the potential to cause some havoc, especially in that second round matchup if North Carolina should beat Howard or Wagner. I would say you've got New Mexico State, or sorry, not New Mexico State, just New Mexico, the Lobos. They've got the potential as an 11 seed to do some damage. Baylor could be a sleeping giant. Nevada has been pretty good this year. Arizona feels like they've, you know, after the 15 loss last year to Princeton in that first round, they're looking for revenge. So there's a lot of potential for upsets in that bracket. The Midwest also feels like this one is primed for some upsets because Purdue, historically, here in the last 3 years since Zach Edey's been on the roster, even though he's another, you know, the player of the year again this year, they've exited early the 2 of those 3 years. They did make it to the Sweet 16 one year, but they lost to the Cinderella that year, who was St. Peter's, who's in this bracket. What do you know? They are a 15 seed again this year, though, so they'd have to go all the way through to get to Purdue, should Purdue, you know, chalk it out and keep winning there. TCU could be a sneaky team here. Gonzaga as a 5 seed feels very dangerous to me. They're one that not a lot of people are talking about. It's some of these teams that nobody's talking about. Those are the ones that are going to come in and cause some havoc. We talked about McNeese. Kansas, if they get back on the right track, they could be very hard to stop. And again, injuries are a key component there. It sounds like, Colors is, isn't that his name? I'm blanking here. Let's see here. Kansas basketball. I need to pull up their roster again here. Players. Here we go. Make sure I've got everybody squared away here. It was, McCullough. God, I kept messing up his name. Last I heard of McCullough, he's still not practicing. Sounds like Hunter Dickinson is about ready to go, so he sounds like he's going to be ready to go for the, I believe, their Thursday game against Samford. So, yeah, it'll still be a little bit of a question mark, especially after the way they performed in the Big 10 tournament, or Big 12 rather, even with those two on out of the game. Let's see, who else here? Oregon. Oregon has been solid when I've watched them this year, so they could be one that makes a dent here. Creighton, pretty up and down this year, but when they're on, they're on. You know, they're kind of another live by the 3, die by the 3 team. Texas has really strengthened it out and come back against some pretty crippling odds early in the year for, you know, making the tournament, but they're here. And yeah, Tennessee again, even though they kind of struggled a little bit in that SEC tournament with that first round, or first game exit, I should say. It wasn't quite first round because they had a bye or two. They're not one to sleep on. So there you go. All right, now we can finally get to the predictions here, bracket by bracket. So starting in the East with the first round, UConn against Stetson. You know, Stetson, the first time they're in, and they do have, I believe, one of the highest scoring players in the nation. UConn's still going to get him. So I would definitely pick UConn there, the 1 over the 16. Historically, only 2 1 seeds have ever been beaten first round. One of them was last year with Purdue. The other one was famously Virginia, who I had picked to win the whole thing that year, losing to, forgot who it was, but they lost first round as well here a few years ago. FAU Northwestern is that tricky 8 and 9 matchup. And I'll tell you what, FAU, having watched them a few times this year, even though they've got a lot of people back and they made a big Final Four appearance last year, this is not the same team. This is not near as good as that last team. Part of it might be just, you know, going into a stronger conference, but it just feels like these guys are not near as strong. And you've got Northwestern, you got Boo Buie playing to, you know, have a great finale here on his career. So I'm going to pick Northwestern. I'm going to go the 9 over the 8 here. So they'll advance to the second round. Then you got the 5 against the 12 here, the 5th seed against the 12th seed. That's San Diego State against UAB. This is one I'm actually going to go the 12 on. I really struggled with this one. I went back and forth, and at first I did have San Diego State winning, but I'm going to go UAB. And San Diego State, even though they had a really strong performance and made it to the title game last year, no, I have them slipping back this year. So UAB winning this one. Yale versus Auburn. This is the 4 against the 13. I did consider the Ivy League, but I think if Yale had gotten any other draw, if they had gotten Duke as the other 4 seed, if they had gotten Bama as that other 4 seed, or if they had gotten Kansas as that other 4 seed, I would have taken Yale. But since it's Auburn, since they're coming off a strong SEC tournament win, and yes, even though sometimes it is dangerous to pick that lower seeded conference tournament winner, I'm going to take him. I'm going to take Auburn Tigers. So we'll have a bit of an in-state rivalry in that second round between UAB and Auburn, by my bracket at least. Next up is the 6 versus 11. This is BYU against, I can never pronounce their name right. I believe it's Duquesne or Duquesne. I've heard both. And they, had a tougher time in their tournament, but they made it through as the 11 seed. But I got to go BYU here. BYU, again, when they're shooting lights out, you can't stop them. They might have one of the higher scores in the first round. Illinois against Morehead State. Morehead State has been decent when I've watched them a couple times this year, but Illinois, coming off the Big Ten Conference win, I got to go Illinois. They're playing pretty well right now. Number 7, Washington State against Drake. I'm going to go Drake. I'm going to go the 10 seed here. A lot of people have talked about Drake being one of the top 2 or 3 Cinderella possibilities this year. I have to agree. They're in good shape there. And then you got number 2, Iowa State against South Dakota State, the Jackrabbits. It's going to be Wabbit season for the old clones. And, yep, I'm going to go the Cyclones there to win that one. Let's go to the South now for the first round picks. Houston against Longwood. This is the 16-1. You got to go Houston here. Longwood kind of unexpectedly won their conference tournament, so yeah, just go Houston there. The 8-9 matchup here is one that I did consider a little bit as well. Nebraska against Texas A&M, and while Nebraska, it's good to see them in. It's their first time in years. This is the old Iowa State head coach Fred Hoiberg. I think you got to go with Texas A&M here. They just, it felt like, even though Florida got them in the SEC tournament there, it felt like one where A&M is really showing their strength here as of late. So I got to go A&M to pull the, I guess minor upset, the 9 over the 8 there. So I got 2 9s over the 8 in these first 2 brackets here. Next up is going to be your 5 seed Wisconsin against 12 seed James Madison. And this is one I at first was picking James Madison because I'm like, sometimes, either your winner or your runner-up in the conference tournament can fall short. This is one I really considered it, but I'm like, you know what? The way Wisconsin's been playing, James Madison arguably didn't have as strong a schedule, even though they do have a massive, amount of wins this year. They did win over Michigan State early in the year. That is true. That's one that a lot of people still point back to, but I got to go Badgers here. I got to go Wisconsin. Next up is going to be Duke versus Vermont, the 4 versus 13. And I like Duke in this game. I don't like them comfortably, though. I think this is one Duke wins probably by less than 3 possessions. So I look at it as a 5 or a 6 point win, coming down to free throws at the end. But Vermont, they'll hit some shots, so that one will be a little close. maybe consider if you're betting taking the spread on Vermont especially if it's like 8 or 9. I don't know what the spread is right now, but yeah. Next up is going to be the 6 versus 11, and again, these are also tricky picks. It's the Texas Tech against NC State. This is a case where I'm going to say NC State coming hot off that ACC win. Their momentum stops. I got to go Texas Tech. Also, it's also the argument Texas Tech is in the stronger conference, even though they have had like some bad losses this year, in particular the Texas loss, which had some other stuff going on with it, with some arguments and fighting and stuff. Texas Tech is just the stronger, out of the stronger conference, arguably also a stronger roster. There are some players that have been in the tournament before, so I got to go Texas Tech there. Then you got number 3, Kentucky against Oakland. This, I feel like, is not one I would look at as a 14 over the 3 upset. They don't happen too often, but yeah, I'm going to go Kentucky here. Florida against the winner of Boise State or Colorado, which is an interesting first 4 game. Yeah, but we'll leave the first 4 off for now. But Florida, I think, is able to beat both teams. Colorado, in my opinion, I've seen them play a little bit. They're a decent team. I don't know if they're necessarily one that should have been in one of the first 4 in the play-in games. I would have definitely said someone like Michigan State should have been in there instead, but it is what it is. But Florida, I have beating either Boise State or Colorado, depending on the result of that first 4 game. Then you got number 2, Marquette against Western Kentucky. I'm going to pick Marquette here, regardless of what the roster looks like. I think they're solid enough to win that first round. Then we go to the West. Here is North Carolina against Howard or Wagner. North Carolina wins that one pretty comfortably, the 1 over the 16. You've got number 8, Mississippi State against number 9, Michigan State. This is the one, I know a lot of people like Michigan State here, and it's more the name brand, it's more the coach. I get it, but Mississippi State is a lot of defense, a lot of strong defense, and if they can shut down the Michigan State roster, boom, they can win this one by 10, maybe even 15 points. So I got the 8 seed over the 9 here. I've got Mississippi State winning over Michigan State. Then you got number 5, St. Mary's against Grand Canyon. I have kind of gone, maybe not totally back and forth here. It was a case where I at first considered going the 12 over the 5 here, but I am going to pick St. Mary's here. St. Mary's, did beat Gonzaga a couple times this year in the West Coast Conference, so usually that's a pretty good sign because Gonzaga is used to rolling in that conference and then maybe occasionally splitting a game with St. Mary's, but as is bound to happen some years. But that being said, yeah, St. Mary's, I think, has got a pretty good spot here in their bracket. You got number 4, Alabama against Charleston. And I'll tell you what, Alabama, they've had some decent victories this year, but they've never really impressed me much as a team. Charleston, though, this is one I can see the 13 beating the 4. So I've got Charleston advancing here. This might be a bit of a minor upset or a major upset in some brackets, but I don't know. I'm not convinced about this Bama team, so give me Charleston. You got number 6, Clemson against New Mexico. New Mexico winning their conference. That's the Mountain West, if I'm not mistaken, which was pretty stacked again this year with a lot of entries getting into the tournament. And again, the ACC has been down this year. Clemson has really been up and down. For every great win, they've got a couple of bad losses or questionable losses. So I got to go New Mexico, the Lobos to upset there, the 11 over the 6. And then we got number 3, Baylor against Colgate. Baylor all day. Colgate has been, even though they've got a tall guy in there who I forget now, I think he's almost a 7-footer, who's big and tough and physical, he'll get some points for sure. But I think Baylor can shoot over him and they can do well here. So this one is it's pretty crucial to me. But I've got 3 Baylor against winning over Colgate. You got number 7, Dayton against Nevada. Now, Nevada, I've watched a little bit, and they're okay. Dayton, I've watched a little bit more, and I feel like they've been kind of up in the rankings and stuff this year out of the Atlantic 10, and they're not near as strong as their ranking. They've got maybe, one ranked victory early where they were unranked and they beat a ranked team. I forget who it was, but I got to go Nevada here. I got to go the strength of the conference again, helping out Nevada. So that's the 10 over the 7. And last but not least is Arizona against Long Beach State. I would actually not be surprised if Long Beach State goes into this game, and it's traditional to happen sometimes. You have your, maybe not your favorite team can lead at halftime. Usually it happens with the 1 seeds if they're a little slow to start, in their first game as well. I wouldn't be surprised if Long Beach State actually takes a lead going into like the last couple of TV timeouts here in this game. But Arizona, I think, will end up pulling out the victory here. So I've got Arizona advancing to the second round. And the last of the first rounds is the Midwest bracket. Purdue against, this is who again? I'm trying to remember. Oh, it's Montana State or Grambling for that first four. And Montana State is one of those few teams this year that has a 500 record or lower. One of the few in there this year, and Grambling, I feel like would be the victor in that first four. That's about the only confident one I can pick in the first four this year is Grambling over Montana State. But Purdue, I think, will handle. They will advance through the first game this year, not like last year, so they'll be fine. Utah State against TCU is the 8-9 matchup for this bracket. And my first instinct was Utah State because TCU has been really, really up and down in that Big 12 conference. But you look at it again, you got to say, well, look at the strength of the conference. Look at the speed of the TCU players. They've got, the most or second most, depending on how some of these tournaments wound out. You might have had a team pass them in the rankings there, and statistically. But I believe TCU is still the highest amount of fast break points scored in the entire nation. So I have that advantage going to TCU. So that's the 9 over the 8 there. And then we have number 5, Gonzaga against McNeese State. And this one I have gone back and forth on, and still to this moment I am thinking about it, and I'm like, I feel like I might be picking the wrong one here. My initial instinct was take McNeese State, but whenever we have Gonzaga in a spot where everybody's kind of doubting them, they can come back and they can win, including last year against UCLA. So I got to go Gonzaga here, the 5 over the 12. Very, very close, but McNeese State, again, they won a bunch of games this year, all of them convincing, but it is in one of the weakest conferences, so we have to consider that as well. Number 4, Kansas against number 13, Samford. I'm going to drink some Kool-Aid here. I'm going to go Samford over Kansas. Just because it just feels like this Kansas team, if this was a case where, okay, they had a couple players injured going into the Big 12 tournament and they lost that first game, fine. If it was only that, I think everyone would be picking Kansas. But because this is the most losses they've had in the Big 12 ever under Bill Self as a coach, because even though they have a very, very stacked roster, like one of the best rosters. I think they were number 1 or 2 in the preseason AP poll. Because of all those circumstances, I think you got to say Kansas is a bit of a question mark going into this tournament. Now, of course, we could all be dead fucking wrong, and they could turn around and just surprise the hell out of us and go all the way to the Final Four. But I'm not seeing that this year, and I think Samford is one of those teams. A lot of people have talked about being a hot 3-point shooting team. It's a live by the 3, die by the 3 team as well. So you gotta be careful here, but I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. I'm going number 13, Samford, over number 4, Kansas, the upset there. Number 6, South Carolina against number 11, Oregon. I'm going another upset here with Oregon. You got Dana Altman, a very experienced coach, going up against, I believe, a coach in South Carolina whose name I'm forgetting, who's the first time in the March Madness tournament, if I'm not mistaken. And South Carolina, they've been solid in the SEC, and they got some big, impressive wins early. But since then, I feel like they've been put on too high a pedestal in that SEC, and we've seen several teams knock them down, including a huge loss at Auburn. I believe that was almost like a 40-point loss or whatever it was. Or maybe it was Tennessee, one of the two. It was one of those teams I remember. Yeah, I think they lost by almost 40 points on the road. So, yeah, I'm going to go number 11, Oregon. And you got number 3, Creighton against Akron. You got to go Creighton here. I think the 3-seed advances here. This is one I'm not really spending too much time on. You've got number 7, Texas, against Colorado State or Virginia, University of Virginia, the Cavaliers. And Tony Bennett's team, I don't know if they even get out of the first 4 here. The fact that they got in was a little surprising to me, too. They've just not been consistent at all this year. Even in a down ACC year, they haven't been very convincing. Texas will beat whoever it is between Colorado State or Virginia. And then number 2, Tennessee against a former Cinderella, St. Peter's. I don't see the Cinderella magic coming back, even though St. Peter's had a really tough time in their conference tournament and they just kept pulling off wins. And even though, yes, Tennessee is coming off a very rough performance in their conference game, I don't see Tennessee doing that again. I feel like Tennessee has been a team this year. I've been doubting them a lot this year. They've been burning me consistently in the March Madness tournament the last couple years with Rick Barnes still being a good coach, but just not quite having it there. This year, he's got a team that can play well, pretty well defensively. You got Dalton Knecht and a bunch of other contributors there. That offense is much more high scoring than we're used to out of a Tennessee team, even if they all shot, 30% or whatever in that loss to whoever the hell it was. I forgot who it was by now. Despite all that, I am not buying the Kool-Aid here. I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid here. It's number 2, Tennessee, to advance. Okay, so that's our first round picks. Second round picks, here we go. I have number 1 UConn against number 9 Northwestern. Go ahead and pick UConn here. Northwestern will play well, but I don't know. I don't see this being a case where the 9 upsets the 1 in the second round, even though we've seen it happen actually a few times here the last couple of years. UAB against Auburn. We mentioned it's an in-state rivalry, a little bit of a rivalry, I guess. The bigger rivalry being, of course, Alabama versus Auburn. But that's clearly not going to happen in this bracket. It would have to wait till the Final Four if it's going to happen. And both as 4 seeds, I don't quite see it happening. That being said, though, I think Auburn wins this a little more competitive. Could see, again, we'll see where the spread is if it happens to be these two matching up. Even then, I would say UAB would probably cover that spread as the underdog. But yeah, Auburn should still win that game. So I'm picking Auburn to advance to the Sweet 16. BYU against Illinois. My first instinct here actually was to take BYU over Illinois because again, you got sometimes that conference tournament winner kind of slowing down once they get to the big bracket, the big dance. I'm gonna say in this case though, Illinois does win. It's close. I just look at BYU being that live by the 3, die by the 3 team, and this could be a case where they die by the 3. And Illinois with just enough good magic on the inside. Shannon is just playing out of his mind right now. Cases like that, I think you got to go with Illinois in this case. And then another in-state kind of rivalry, not really, would be Drake against Iowa State in the 2 versus 10 matchup. And Drake is going to play hard, and they could be a huge monster killer here if they do advance to the Sweet 16, but you got to go the Clones here. The Clones are just too impressive with their recent wins and stuff. I got to go Iowa State to win there. Okay, next up would be Houston against number 9, Texas A&M. Pick Houston here. Again, another in-state matchup here, and they have played already earlier this year. A lot of people pointed that out. And A&M kind of had Houston's number there for a while. They closed the gap at the end there. But I think Houston this time, they'll be a little more prepared, and they'll put them to bed and advance to the Sweet 16. You got number 5, Wisconsin against number 4, Duke up next. I'm going to take Wisconsin. A little bit of a stronger conference in the Big Ten than the ACC this year, so that's going to help Duke. Duke is also used to, if they can get out, they're usually good at getting out of that first game. It's that second game is where they can get their kneecaps taken out. So I have the Badgers doing that to the Blue Devils this time. You got number 6, Texas Tech against number 3, Kentucky. By my odds here in the next one, which it's the chalk game anyway, so it's probably what's going to be. But I'll go ahead and pick Kentucky here. I can see them getting on a big run here and getting pretty far. Then you got number 7, Florida against Marquette. This is where I see some madness happening and Marquette losing. And again, that's regardless of who's on the floor. Florida can really stretch you out as a team. They can really play you well, shoot well from the outside, shoot well. They've got a couple big guys in there, big guards that'll get in there and get some big and one opportunities. I'm going to go the Gators. Number 7, Florida over number 2, Marquette. Next up is going to be the West bracket. The West bracket. This is one I really did think about. Okay, if we're going to have 2 1 seeds fall first weekend, you got to think it's Purdue and North Carolina is the most vulnerable. And I looked at this and I looked at this and I'm like, I just think the roster for North Carolina is strong enough with Baycott and some of those other shooters. I think it's just strong enough that Mississippi State will struggle. It's going to be, again, a good, probably low-scoring game. I would, a good defensive game if you're in the mood for defense. But North Carolina, I see winning that one, maybe by a scratch and claw, maybe by could be a buzzer beater situation, could be an overtime situation, could be very close. But I have North Carolina winning that one, advancing to the Sweet 16. Then I would have number 5, St. Mary's against number 13, Charleston, next for mine. St. Mary's. I'll pick St. Mary's a little easier here. I don't quite see Charleston as the Cinderella this year, but in case they go pretty far, I will at least name drop them again for this one upset. You got number 11, New Mexico against Baylor. Number 3, Baylor. This is one. This game could be crucial, obviously, for me, because I'm looking at the rest of my bracket here. This could be a crucial game. I'm going to pick Baylor over New Mexico, but again, New Mexico has some potential to be a Cinderella, so I would not sleep on them. And then you got number 10, Nevada against number 2, Arizona. Madness. I have number 10, Nevada beating Arizona. This feels weird to me, but somehow I just feel like Arizona, in the weakest of the Power 5 in the Pac-12, even then, they have had some questionable games. Caleb Love, transfer out of North Carolina. A lot of people are predicting a Elite 8 matchup between him and his old team in North Carolina. I don't think they're going to get that far. Arizona, with an arguably stronger roster last year, couldn't get out of that first round and lost to Princeton. So I got to go with a massive upset here, and I got to go Nevada, the 10 seed advancing to the Sweet 16. Next up would be number 1, Purdue against TCU. More madness. This is the spot. I'm taking the 9 over the 1. I have rarely predicted. Usually I stick my 1 seeds through the first weekend, but not this year. TCU over Purdue. I think TCU and their fast break points, they're going to kill Purdue in that method. Yeah, I've seen a couple people predict it, so I'm not the only one. But TCU over Purdue, I'm feeling pretty good about that. That's, Purdue, I've talked with a lot of people, family members especially, and they're like, Purdue is good, but they're beatable. And this is totally a case where TCU can beat them. Next up, we would have number 5, Gonzaga against number 13, Sanford. This is where I think Gonzaga can start on a run and really surprise us and go pretty far. So I have Gonzaga winning against Sanford. Then we have Oregon and Dana Altman going up against his former team in number 3, Creighton. More madness. I'm going an 11 seed to advance to the Sweet 16 here again with Oregon. This is a spot where even though McDermott got very far last year with Creighton, obviously getting to the Final Four, and losing just by inches to San Diego State, I think this is going to go ahead and be the case where Creighton, again, another live by the 3, die by the 3 team, they fall short, and Oregon can outlast them. But that one is tough. That one is one I considered Creighton to advance for a while there, but again, they've been very up and down this year. And yes, while they have great wins like at home against UConn, they have other questionable losses like Colorado State. And that was at Creighton too, so be careful. And then the last one here would be number 7, Texas against number 2, Tennessee. As long as Tennessee can get out of these first 2 rounds, I feel like they have an easier path than maybe some other 2 seeds this year. So I think Tennessee will beat Texas and advance to the Sweet 16. Okay, so now we go from the Sweet 16 down to the Elite 8. This is where you're going to have to hear me out here. Number 1, UConn against number 4, Auburn. And this is where it's very important to go back and say this East bracket is very, very, very dense and tough. Tough bracket. One of the toughest brackets I've seen put together in a while. Probably in the last 2 to 3 years, this is the toughest bracket ever assembled in that time stretch. I'm sure there's been some tougher brackets before. I can particularly remember a year where I covered a lot of these games for a local radio thing. I think it was 2017, the year of 2017. So that was the year North Carolina beat Gonzaga in the championship. North Carolina had a very tough bracket that year as well. They had a lot of obstacles in front of them, and they stuck through. Now UConn, okay, you get the first weekend. Yep, Stetson, they've got a high-scoring player, yes, but you should be able to beat them. Then you got Northwestern. They'll be tough, and could be a close victory there, maybe closer than some of the experts are picking. Because let's not forget, UConn last year, remember, they were winning all their games by an average of, what was it, like 17 or 18 points? Average of that. Not just, they won a couple games by that much. Average. They, whatever methodology the committee had last year for seeding UConn, they were fucking dead wrong. And they easily got through. And I think everyone by the end of the first weekend looked at it like, UConn's going to win this thing. It became very predictable. I think that's why the ratings slipped as far as they did last year for the final games there. I remember not even hardly watching the championship game last year because everybody just knew it was UConn was just going to roll. Now this year they're going to make them prove it. And Auburn is going to be tough. And here's the key thing. This is the start of the second weekend. It might not be the first game that weekend because we don't know the schedule yet. But it could be an early game, or later game that Thursday night. So Auburn plays you tough. Pearl is one of the toughest, most animated coaches out there. He's going to make his players go through hell and try their best to beat UConn. But I think UConn will scratch out the victory there, and they beat Auburn. So that's the 1 over the 4. And then also in the Elite, or in the Sweet 16 here in this bracket would be number 3, Illinois against number 2, Iowa State. This is where I can see Illinois cooling off a bit, and where Iowa State can keep advancing, keep moving. So I have the Clones beating the Illini there in the Sweet 16 matchup. And it would be UConn versus Iowa State when we get to the Elite 8 in that bracket. Next up would be the South. This is where Houston would play Wisconsin. This could be a trickier game than we're thinking, but Houston, I think, will win, and potentially, if they're on a hot streak at that point and they're just really blowing by their teams like Texas A&M and Longwood, then it could be an even tougher night for Wisconsin, but we'll see. I've got Houston winning that one. And then number 3, Kentucky against Florida, number 7 seed in this bracket. And even though they've been splitting this year in the SEC, I think Kentucky can hang around. This is where Calipari and his experience will come in and help out. So the 3 seed Kentucky advancing to the Elite 8 in that one. Then we've got the West bracket. This is where I have some more madness for you. Number 1, North Carolina against St. Mary's. I'm going the 5 over the 1. This is tricky. This is really tricky, but I'm going to go the 5 over the 1. North Carolina losing in the 3rd round. And this is going to be the second 1 seed to fall. And it's tricky, and I could be wrong about it, but St. Mary's, they've stuck around, and they've proven a couple people this year. This could be a big challenge for them, and I think they have enough to get in there. You got number 3, Baylor against number 10, Nevada. This is where, again, make or break moment for my bracket. If Baylor does happen to lose first round to Colgate, it's going to screw this whole section of my bracket because I've got Baylor advancing to play St. Mary's in the Elite 8 to determine the winner of the West bracket. And in the Midwest, we've got some more madness here with number 9 TCU against Gonzaga in the 3rd round here, and I'm going to pick Gonzaga. I'm going to pick them to advance. TCU, yes, their fast break is going to be there, but the Zags with Mark Few coaching, again, experienced coach, I see the Zags advancing. And you got number 11 Oregon against number 2 Tennessee. This is where Rick Barnes, obviously having beat his former school last week in Texas, will advance, and I think he'll be able to get the Ducks and move on to the Elite 8. So my Elite 8 are number 1 UConn, number 2 Iowa State out of the East, number 1 Houston, number 3 Kentucky out of the South. It'll be number 5 St. Mary's and number 3 Baylor in the West, and number 5 Gonzaga, number 2 Tennessee out of the Midwest. So how do these games go? Hear me out on this. UConn, right? Everyone's picking them. They're the favorite to win the tournament again this year. How tough is this bracket? Is it tough enough that, yep, okay, you survive that first weekend, and then you got a double, again, if it goes chalk here, you got a double date with Auburn followed by Iowa State. 2 teams, one of which will really light you up on the offense, and your defense is going to have to play hard. And then the next game, your defense is really going to be playing hard. I should say your offense is really going to be struggling against the tough defense of Iowa State, who can now, unlike a couple years in the past year, and Iowa State has done, made some deeper runs in the past. I remember 2 or 3 years ago now. I think it was 2 years ago. They made a pretty deep run all the way to the Sweet 16. Their offense is back on track again this year. So I think UConn, they're going to beat Auburn. They're going to be exhausted. They're going to be wiped out, and then they got to play hot, defensive-minded, fundamentally sound number 2 seed Iowa State. This is where the madness happens. I have Iowa State over UConn. Not just a Regency thing, because Ames is only about 35, 40 minutes away from me. It's not just that, because I'm a Hawkeye fan. So it kind of, I'm not getting killed by picking Iowa State here. It's not tearing out part of my heart. But, this UConn team, they're not a hard team to root for. They're fun to watch and everything, but I just think this is too tough a challenge. And Iowa State, yes, they need to get past Drake. Yes, they need to get past Illinois. And those are not, those are maybe easier said than done. But I think if they can keep advancing, they can get a weakened UConn, a tired UConn, and they can get that Husky. And they can advance to the Final Four. That's going to be my prediction. Then out of the South, I have the winner being Houston here. Kentucky could get on a big run, and they could surprise us and really, really do well here. But I got to go Houston. Houston is really sound again. Defensively, very, very sound team. And offensively, they can score a lot of points when they need to. All right. That would leave us with the West bracket next to determine the winner of this bracket. Number 5, St. Mary's against Baylor. Again, not a lot of people are picking them. Baylor. I think Baylor has a good chance to get out of this bracket as the 3 seed and advance. They're the lowest seed I have advancing to the Final Four, but I have them in there. So I guess that spoils it a little bit. But number 5, Gonzaga against Tennessee. This is where I see the Zags falling a little bit short. The Zags have kind of, aside from last year, they've kind of regressed year after year where it's like, okay, they go to the championship game and they lose. Maybe the next year they make it to the Final Four and lose, Elite 8, Sweet 16, it's been kind of regressing a little bit as other teams have kind of figured them out. This year I see them making a bit of a comeback. They made it to the Elite 8 last year, and I think they do that again this year with even with a 5 seed. But Tennessee, I think, can get them. This is not quite the... they're high scoring, Gonzaga, obviously, but not quite as high scoring as previous years. This is where I see Tennessee's improved offense getting them a big advantage. All right. So my bracket goes like this. We have number 2, Iowa State, winning the East, as crazy as that may sound to some people. I've got number 1, Houston, advancing out of the South. Number 3, Baylor, advancing out of the West. And number 2, Tennessee, out of the Midwest. So that would mean we've got 2 Big 12 teams rematching here for the 4th time this year. I believe they'll play Iowa State and Baylor. And this is where I think Baylor, they're going to have a great run, but it'll end. Iowa State gets to the championship game. And then Houston against Tennessee is going to be very, very, very tough. You could say if Baylor comes out of that tournament, or out of that bracket rather, in the West, a little more weather beaten because they'll the lowest seed to advance and stuff. I can see Iowa State punishing them a little bit and winning by double digits. Houston, Tennessee though is a horse of a different color. That's going to be a much tighter game. I can see the great defense of Houston really shutting down Tennessee in some key moments, but then maybe a late run or 2 by Tennessee to keep it close. And that one I see Houston advancing. So we've got a fourth game again between 2 Big 12 teams. It is the conference this year. It arguably has been the conference the last few years. It's a Big 12 tournament rematch in my championship game. Number 2 Iowa State against number 1 Houston, and in this case, even though Iowa State has the advantage right now, I see Houston leveling it again to 2-2, and I see Houston winning the championship this year. With a victory here. It's probably going to be a lower scoring game. I can totally see Iowa State, again, leading a couple of times, but they're not quite going to have the geographical advantage like they had this last weekend here. I have number 1 Houston winning in the championship game. So there's my bracket. That's how it's going to go, according to me. I don't know if this is anywhere close. I don't know if any of my upsets are going to happen or not. It's always fun to just predict this stuff and just see how it goes, but there you are. All right, that's all I got for now, so we will officially be back later this fall, and we'll get to the Oscar stuff again. And again, your guys' opinions and comments are really going to shape, okay, how much is it worth going into some possible NFL college football predictions when we get into the fall as well. So for sure we'll be back in the fall there sometime, probably start filming sometime in August, and we'll get the first predictions out for the Oscars in September. Other stuff could follow or be just ahead of it. We will see.